Hello and welcome to the May at Right Angles webinar. We are happy to be here with you all. And as you all know, At Right Angles is a math publication aimed at school mathematics published by Azim Premji University ever since 2012. So this time, we're delighted to have with us Prithwijit and the author of an article from the very first issue, July 2012. The article is called The Sweetseller's Trick. And Prithwijit, welcome. We're happy that you have been able to join us.
Thank you.
Prithwijit is an associate professor at the Homi Bhabha Center for Science Education. He is also the national coordinator of the Mathematical Olympiad program of the Government of India. He is an editor of At Right Angles, and fortunately for us, he loves reading and writing all about mathematical problem solving. Thank you for joining us, Prithwijit. Swati Sarkar, no stranger to At Right Angle webinars, also an editor of At Right Angles and an assistant professor at Azim Premji University. Swati is interested in anything to do with mathematics, anything to do with art. Thank you for joining us, Swati. We're also delighted to have with us 3 alumni of our university. All of them graduated from the MA Education course. All of them were taught by Swati and myself in a course called Curricular Material Development. Welcome. Jaai is a teacher and teacher educator. She does a lot of interesting workshops, and she has some questions for Prithwijit, which we will hear after during the course of this webinar. We also have with us Somya. Somya, after graduating from Azim Premji University, started the Gubbachi learning community along with 4 others. She is also a teacher, and she loves thinking about how to get her students thinking from a very early age. Welcome, Somya. And now we have Umesh. Umesh, again, a teacher, but interestingly, he's also diversified into tech resources and is now part of a tech startup company, which works in the field of math resources. Welcome, Umesh. All right. So we'll first hear from Prithwijit. His article, if you have read it, is about a dilemma which you may have been in. Am I getting value for money? And Prithwijit has put this dilemma in very delicious terms, and it comes from a real life incident. So I'm just going to hand it over to you, Prithwijit, to share with us about
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, first of all, I would like to thank At Right Angles and especially Sneha for inviting me to speak in this webinar. And I'm really thankful to all of you for joining us as well this afternoon. So I'll start with a brief description of the article, sort of a gist of the article that I wrote in 2012. And so as you can see that I work in Homi Bhabha Center for Science Education, and that's where it all started from. So it's actually based on my experience with the canteen caterer of my workplace, HBCSE. They were selling 2 gulab jamuns per bowl, and suddenly they switched to 3 per bowl one day. So then I thought, okay, I mean, why did they do it? And are they selling more sweet or less or something? Less than what they were selling initially. So let me do the math. So I just sat down and worked out the math. And in a few days' time, I came up with the article. And then I sent it to Dr. Shailesh Shirali, who's the chief editor of At Right Angles, and he loved it. And within a few days, the At Right Angles team turned my very bland script into a sweet story. So I'm going to tell you about the story very briefly. Uh, so in the story, you would have come across Mr. X and Mr. Y, but I have changed their names to Krishna Sweets and Radha Sweets. So there is one Mr. and one Mrs. or Miss. So Krishna Sweets is selling two per bowl, and Radha Sweets is offering three gulab jamuns per bowl. And Krishna is offering a price of six per piece. Say a typical number is six per piece, and Radha is offering a price of five per piece. So yeah, I've written down the prices here. Now I want to find out who is offering a greater volume of sweets to the buyer. So now you see, I mean, I started with this. So this is a real life scenario. You have a bowl and there are two spheres inside it, two gulab jamuns, and on the other hand, you have a similar cylindrical cup and with three spheres inside it. Now, so this is the starting point. I mean, you see the mathematical objects, and then what you do, you look at, you just extract the information that is required to calculate the volume of sweets being offered by the two shopkeepers. Now, see, in this case, if you assume that the bowls are cylindrical, then you can actually take that slice of the cylinder where the spheres are tangent to that. So basically, then if you take a top-down view, you'll come across with a profile like this. This is the outer circle represents the boundary of the cylindrical container, and the two spheres are represented by two circles which are tangent to each other externally and tangent to the larger circle internally. Similarly, in the other case, you can extract the information uh, in this way, where you have three spheres touching each other externally, and each is tangent to the outer boundary, the cylinder, which is the larger circle, uh, internally. And I'm looking at the circular cross section of the sphere, the larger circle. So this is basically the top-down view of the equatorial plane of the spheres. Now, so this is enough for me to calculate the volume, because as we'll see in the next slide, you can actually compute the radius of each sphere in both the figures. So in this case, it is very simple. You see, this is a larger circle and there are two smaller circles inside, and you can easily work out the radius of each sphere by the simple observation that you have these two diameters adding up to the diameter of the larger circle. And then if you do the math very carefully, you will see that the total volume of sweets being offered by Krishna is pi r cube over 3, where r is the radius of the larger circle. That is the radius of the container, cylindrical container. In the other case, it's a bit more involved, because you don't have a very plain and simple figure like this. You have three circles touching each other, and then you make the observation that if you take any two of them, then their centers are separated by a distance of, if small r is the radius of each circle, then the distance between the centers is 2r. So you get an equilateral triangle here. And then you also observe that since these small circles touch the large circle internally, if you can look at the difference of the radii to get the distance between the center of the larger circle and the center of the smaller circles. And then one uses a nice property of equilateral triangle, that this center of the circle actually coincides with centroid, which is also the other centers. I mean, because all centers of equilateral triangle coincide at one point. So this becomes the centroid, and using that information, one can do the computation and find out the radius of each of these smaller circles. And then one can compute the volume easily by using the formula for volume of the sphere. And one can see that the total volume offered by Radha Sweets is this much. So approximately, I mean, V2 is 1.2 times V1. So Radha is offering 20% extra for 3 more rupees. So I mean, from a buyer's point of view, this may be a fair deal, because I mean, he's paying only rupees 3 more, and he's getting one more piece and also more volume of sweets. So I mean, if a buyer thinks that okay, I'm getting, I'm paying less per piece and I'm getting more sweets, and there's a difference of only 3 rupees, so I don't mind actually going for this deal because I'm the unit price here is 5 rupees, but I'm actually paying only 3 rupees extra on the aggregate. So that type of that may actually uh, in the psychological space or domain, the buyer may be sort of enticed to go for this deal as opposed to this one. So that actually was the this was very revealing for me because I also didn't know initially, what's going on until I did the math, that this actually was quite striking that this is what is happening. And then this is the analysis. So if you assume that the cost per unit volume is the same for both, and then you can calculate that Krishna's profit per unit volume is this, and Radha's is this figure, and then Radha is making more profit if V2, which is the total volume offered by Radha, is less than 1.25 times the volume offered by Krishna's total volume. Now, as you can see, in our analysis, Radha is offering 1.2 times the volume that Krishna is offering. So the Radha is actually in the range of making profit by using this scheme. So, and more than that, actually there's a range of values of the price which Radha can set. Like if Krishna sets the price at P1, then Radha can actually choose any value in this interval from 0.8 P1 to P1 and set the price at that per piece and make profit. So this actually, if it's 6 for P, if P1 is 6 rupees, then Radha can come down to 4.8 rupees. So that's actually quite good because again the buyer will see the difference of 1.2 rupees per piece. So that immediately will actually attract the buyer towards Radha's offer than Krishna's offer. So this was, this is the story there, which very briefly sort of summarized what was happening in HBCC canteen. Now, in comments, I would like to say that this article may be used as an example of modeling real life situations for classroom teaching, and it also shows application of some topics of the math curriculum to a problem which originated from an observation made in real life. So this is all I have to say in very brief about the story or about the experience. So thank you.
Thank you, Prithwijit. That was, I relived the excitement with which we received this article and worked on it. And I think that it was just such a good example of how a mathematician approached a problem, and yet you use school mathematics to arrive at some discoveries. So, as a teacher and as a person who works on curriculum material, it has always been a task and a challenge to find material which is suited to the child's context. And yet we all know, this excitement that we feel when we see this problem makes us realize that that's crucial. That's what we need to grab interest. And I'm sure that all my panelists have questions for you based on this. So let me go to Zai first. Zai, would you have any questions for Prithwijit?
Yeah, I have an observation to make. So the article basically talks about a real life situation which has been mathematized, and then it's a solution is obtained. And while doing that, multiple concepts from mathematics have been used, right? So it feels that when such a real life situation has to be taken to the classroom, then using this at a stage when concepts are already taught to the students, and then they have to use real life situations and then apply those concepts there, is maybe easier, and it might be a little more challenging to use such real life scenarios at a stage of introducing new concepts to students. So this is what I feel. Are there any comments on this?
Yes, you are right. As you can see that in the article, I have used, for analysis, I have used things which students learn as sort of, as disjoint blocks as a part of their math curriculum. and which are introduced in a very, I mean, most of the cases they are introduced in a very abstract way, without any reference to any real life situation or any context that people may observe, from day to day life. So for teaching every concept using real life situation may be very challenging. But the other way, or if you go the other way around, like you observe something, and then you feel that okay, maybe this has some math in it, or this actually lends itself to some mathematical analysis from where we can draw some conclusion, or from where something interesting may come out. So that fun element actually comes if you go the other way around. So that is my observation on this. Maybe other panelists may add to this, add to what I have said.
Yeah, can Swati, do you want to comment on some of the strategies that Prithwijit used, which you saw in the PPT? Because apart from individual blocks of content, I think individual skills were also merged together in his article. So I saw a lot of modeling, a lot of abstraction. You want to talk about that?
So one of the things that is very clear is what are the important questions. There was I mean, the way the article starts, right? Two people arguing that one is arguing for Radha sweets, another is for Krishna sweets. So how do you decide? So what are the quantities that you need to, look into and compare? And it is not just one simple quantity or the other, right? You have the prices difference, and then there is number of pieces, and from there he actually comes to what really matters. That's the volume of the total sweet you are getting in each bowl, right? So I think first step will be, what are the questions that are important for a given situation,
Okay.
and then how do you solve it?
Okay. So zeroing in on what do I really want to find out.
Yeah.
And then the next step, what that Prithwijit did, I think, was making it a simpler situation, right? Modeling it. Prithwijit, can you talk a little bit about modeling and
Yes,
why
yes.
it's not dumbing down? Sometimes you think, oh, but that's not the real situation. Why is modeling not dumbing down the situation?
Yeah. See, modeling is very important because, see, first of all, when you are analyzing a real life situation, you start with a very simple case where the things are very close to ideal. Like, I mean, you would rarely come across, two gulab jamuns of the same size. I mean, you just compare any two or any three of them in the shop, you'll see that they're of different size. Then, obviously, I mean, you would rarely come across a container which is a perfect cylinder. And more often than not, I mean, you will not get a cylindrical cup. You'll get, maybe a hemispherical bowl or maybe something different where the things are more complicated. Now, but in order to begin the analysis at the zeroth stage, you actually start with the simplest situation. It's not dumbing down, but it's actually you're starting with something that will work. That you know that okay, you can work out, and maybe you get some idea that okay, the simplest case I have a solution like this, and maybe then you get on with the others. Other cases, I mean, you just bring in more complexity, like you can replace the cylindrical bowl with a hemispherical bowl. Then it's not simple at all. I mean, at least from the, I mean, if you think of it, it's not that easy, because here we are lucky. I mean, if you put two spheres in a cylinder, then you see that the plane where they're tangent is already vertical. But whereas for hemisphere, I mean, you can actually vary the sizes of the spheres, and you can at any level you can get a cross section where two or three spheres will fit in. So their sizes will also actually depend on the depth of the bowl, to what depth you are actually, I mean, at what depth you are placing them. So it becomes slightly more complicated at that. I mean, so that's why uh, one has to start with the simplest case possible and see whether elementary methods can be applied, or elementary techniques can be applied to get to a solution. And if you can get to a solution, if you can extract some meaning out of it, there's nothing like it. That's the best thing possible. And it also happens in other subjects. Like, I mean, we all come across gas laws when we study physics, like Boyle's law, Charles law, and all those things. They talk of ideal gases. I mean, they don't talk of real gases where things get more complicated. So, in any subject, I mean, the first thing when you try to model something, I think you have to start with very simple case where you can actually do the math and work out something, and then you can add more complexities and get to a different domain and sort of make things more exciting. That's all I have.
Yeah. It's really very reassuring to hear a mathematician say this, because you are actually taking a complex problem, you're breaking it down, then you're simplifying it, but keeping in mind the constraints which have to occur, and then you're taking it back into the real situation. Thanks so much for that, Prithwijit. I know, Zai, that your question is not fully answered. And over the course of this discussion, we will be touching on the question that you asked, can we use smaller situations to think? But I hope you saw the value of using a complex situation. Yeah. So Somya, would you have a question for Prithwijit?
Yes, so as an educator, math educator, especially at the primary and middle school level, we are constantly looking for real life situations to make a point with our students, especially because they come from such rich life experiences. So, for me, the question is that, what are the principles that I can apply as an educator, which can help me frame these, these nuanced questions, these nuanced real life situations for my students. So what I'm actually looking for is the principles guiding me in making making these situations for the children, for the learners.
Whoa, that's a big one, Soumya. That is really a big big question, and a question that we must engage with. But I think, like Prithwijit did, we can only take it in bits and parts. So let's listen to experiences of others, and maybe we can come together with some of these principles that will emerge as we talk. So, anyone who wants to share experiences of taking this, taking context into math or math into context, would anybody like to share some stories?
Yeah, I would like to add one example. So I feel that not all so there's some concepts which can easily be explained using real life situations like fractions, but I think there are some concepts where like LCM which really don't require real life situations. So I can give you one example which I personally have experienced. So when I was trying to teach LCM to students, I tried. So there was a problem which basically was something like there are two people, and the first person treks every 10th day, and the second person treks every 15th day. And if both of them have trekked on the same day today, so which will be the next day that they will trek together? So here, basically, you get a solution of this problem by finding the LCM of 10 and 15. But what I felt at that point of time was, even if students did not know the concept of LCM, they could just use their mathematical logic, and then they could figure out that, okay, the first person went trekking on the 10th day, the 20th day, and the 30th day, and the same case with the second person. And then they could just figure out that they would trek again the 30th day. So I feel that, so at that point of time I felt that in such cases maybe using real life situations was not really required. So yeah, this is something I experienced.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm sure all of us have done these word problems, and we just remember trekking, dance class, singing class. It just the class varies, but the problem remains the same. I'll just ask Umesh whether he has any questions, and then we'll get someone to respond to you.
Yeah, thank you, Sneha. Can we agree that a few concepts can be taught using real life situations, but that there are some concepts for which we connect to the real life situations may not be immediately apparent? Okay, and these could be building blocks of which are needed in the later grades.
Okay.
Maybe the yeah.
Yeah. You want to add to that, Umesh?
Maybe most of the concepts are not directly related to the real life situations. We are going to continue that. Suppose we are teaching something like that, maybe that is a building block to the next concept.
Okay, okay, okay.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah. Prithwijit, Swati, any inputs?
I think Swati can actually have a go at it.
Okay, so there are, when you are talking about connecting math to real life, there are probably three different things. One is what you do when you are introducing a concept. Now, there are several concepts which are there in the syllabus, in the textbook, and we need to see what is the need for keeping that concept. Sometimes the need is a mathematical need, and sometimes the need is a real life need. In some cases there can, both needs can be there, but there are examples, and the glorious example I believe is HCF and LCM, where the mathematical need is very clear. You need them in order to play with unlike fractions. If we want to compare unlike fraction or add or subtract them, then at some point you need LCM. And for to calculate certain kinds of LCM, you need HCF. But unfortunately, if we don't see that and we try to force real life onto everything, then we end up getting, word problems which seem very, very artificial. Okay, and children feel that too, and that's when they kind of get turned off. Okay. On the other hand, we do use mathematics in real life to, one, analyze and come to decisions, which is exactly what Prithwijit's article is doing, and second, also to design things. And I'll take spatial example here. So maybe all of you know why the manholes are circular, and that has to do with certain properties of a circle. And it is exactly same reason why, in a Hawkins kind of pressure cooker where the lid goes inside and locks, the lid cannot be a circle. It has to be a different shape. And so this is where we are using mathematics to design things. And this should be, brought into children's, into textbooks as well. And it can be done at a primary level. The third thing is, and this again, it needs to be developed in how to see mathematics around in life. And, you see context, you see situations, and how do you mathematize? Okay, and that's where you can, think of using various tools that you know already and use them to explore, apply, play around, and frankly that really enriches your experience and connects math to real life. So if we can develop this eye to see mathematics in everyday life, then I think we can empower our children and make their life richer.
Thanks, Swati. The both the examples that you used are so very lovely, and I think that all of us who have dropped something into into a place where it cannot be retrieved will understand why manhole covers are round and not square. So I also want to point out, from what Zay said, that sometimes word problems are taken as contextual problems, but as Swati pointed out, very often the context is a pseudo context and children can make that out. But I do feel that word problems have their own role. For example, example that Zai used was a word problem for LCM, and I think by doing such problems, children practice the concept of LCM, and children understand where LCM is used. I think that word problems do have a role, but that we should not mistake them for contextual problems or for mathematizing a situation. Am I right? Yeah, I can see some head nodding from both Prithwijit and Swati. Do you want to
Yeah,
add? Yeah, yeah,
uh, yeah. I think what you have said is right,
yeah,
because when you are trying to convey an abstract concept, you can formulate it as a word problem, but one should not lose sight of the end goal. That okay, your goal is to sort of convey that this is what the abstract concept is, and this is how you work. So the student should be able to extract the the crux of the problem from the word problem itself. I mean, so word problem will have words and things in a hidden form, and the student should be able to identify what are the crucial things.
yeah,
Whereas when you are modeling something, you just observe it. I mean, you just come across it by accident, say, or it just happens. You observe something and it just strikes you, and then you reflect on it, and then you think, okay, maybe there is some math in it. So here, I mean, the math comes later. The crucial thing is the observation. So you're going from the observation to the mathematization and then to mathematics, but you're using techniques which you have already learned in an abstract way in school. So basically, I mean, these things can be sort of, I mean, given as some kind of. I don't think it will fit in very well in school curriculum per se, but to someone who is very inquisitive and curious, these sort of things can be sort of introduced in a different way. I mean, maybe the teacher makes the observation and shares the observation with the students and say that, okay, can you find something? And the students may actually observe something more than what the teacher has observed. So, I mean, it's not very rigid per se. It's actually quite fluid, and there's no clear demarcation or very sort of clear boundaries that okay, you have to sort of do this and then otherwise you do that. So there's no, I mean, there's no clear boundary. There's no demarcation, and so it's basically enjoying maths in a different way.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and it's for everyone. It's not just for school students. Anyone. I mean, it can be sort of a pastime, like you just observe something, and then when you're having a quiet afternoon or something, you sit down and sort of do something, fiddle around with this, and then get something nice out of it, and then you sit down and type it up. So it's something like that, rather
yeah,
than something that you have to do. There's no target here. It's
yeah.
basically education. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I remember when we were talking, you were talking about the fun element of this, and I think apart from the students having fun, the teachers should also have fun and not kind of force their syllabus into context or vice versa, force mathematics into context. I still remember a student who came up to me and said, does a toilet roll unspool faster as it gets, as the diameter decreases? And I thought, wow, this is the kind of questions which I would like the kids to investigate. So it can come from anywhere, but the tools of how to investigate it, I think that's what teachers need to give students, right? Yeah, so Zai, I think that we have kind of addressed your question about, smaller problems for a small context and the value of using large problems like this. Is there anything else you would like to ask? Or you or Umesh, anyone who would like to ask? Somya? Yeah, Zai, please go.
No, I don't have a question right now.
Oh,
I,
okay.
I think yeah, my first question was answered.
Thank you. What about Umesh? Do you have any more
Yeah.
questions?
If you agree, that means the few concepts can be taught maybe in the later stages. Okay. One more thing is, how can we improve or how can we create spatial reasoning with this article in the classrooms?
Swati, you want to suggest something? Or
So I didn't get the question completely. Some reasoning, right?
Spatial
Spatial
reasoning.
reasoning.
Oh, spatial reasoning. Okay. Okay. Frankly, that's where I personally feel that teachers need to work harder, because children are open and they learn faster, especially if it is a new thing, and adults are the slow learners. Right? So, you see anybody with smartphone, an adult versus a child, and right? So, spatial understanding is something where I think for generations we have suffered a bit, because when we grew up, it was not so much part of school syllabus and curriculum. And so, all teachers, you should not feel bad because you are victims, and you know, this is your chance to kind of reclaim that aspect. Okay. Uh, how do you initiate children into something? Frankly, let them play. And for that, you need to have shapes. Static picture won't do it. Have cutouts, small pieces, identical pieces of many things. Let them, tangram and pentominos, polyominoes, these have become part of school textbooks. Use them well. Start at the primary. And the more you play, you really learn a lot, understand a lot, and frankly, really have fun a lot. And trust me, even if you did not get a lot of chance to play with shapes earlier, and you feel that part of you hasn't developed, you can develop it now, even now. And Sneha is a glorious example who plays with shapes in many different ways now and comes up with brilliant ideas.
It was, and totally started with fear. I was so very reluctant to develop the sense of spatial reasoning. I felt handicapped by it, but I thought I couldn't do it. And really, it was just about taking that plunge and saying, "Okay, I'm going to play." Um, so yeah, anyone who wants to add to that, Somya, do you want to add to that?
Right. So, this thing about not just spatial, but this thing about playing, right? And what I have realized that art of various forms, including things like embroidery, things like performing arts, things like music, lends itself so beautiful to building mathematical thinking. And any one of those strands, it doesn't have to be all of it. Any one of those strands are great to trigger those senses, and which then come in very handy in the classroom. So I'm still wearing my teacher hat here. So we as teachers, we have to remember when we are in a meeting together that we don't shut down a dance class, for whatever reason that we decide to, because of curricular pressures. I had an observation or a thought when Prithwijit was sharing about fun in the classrooms, and I'm sure the audience with us is quite many teachers there, and which doesn't the profession doesn't allow us to have too much fun. So and the time is not available to do that with the children. And so I really strongly feel that these nuanced situations that we spoke about will lend themselves well to learning along with application. Obviously, pitched at the right time and with the right set of students and all of that. The other kind of observation that I had, what Sneha was sharing, is how do we encourage these questions? That's now another exploration to be done. So just these two thoughts which are coming to my mind.
Yeah. Thanks, Soumya. I was just thinking while Swati was talking about playing with shapes, I was thinking, just packing those shapes into a box is a whole mathematical activity, and that can create a whole new problem. So, as Somya said, it's just going to take off from a random question or a random activity or a doubt, or even the need to just clean up the space around you. You never know when these questions are or these activities are going to take on a life of their own. So, Soumya, I want to ask you, if nobody else has any more questions. Does anyone have any questions? Because we also need to take in questions from the audience, and um, I don't see many questions in the chat box, but if any of you have any questions, we can ask. Otherwise, I'm going to ask Soumya to say, was your question answered? You wanted some principles. And would you say that over this discussion, you've been able to cull out some principles?
Yes, and I'm feeling quite satisfied to be here. And one was frankly speaking, that idea that can a situation, is a situation authentic? We cannot dumbify our learners, right? Dumb down our learners. So for that, that principle that we're talking about, an authentic idea, can it be converted into a mathematical model? That situation. So keep that in mind as a as a facilitator. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. The other thought, the other principle that is coming out strongly to me is pre-decide what is it that we are looking out for, and then the sharpness of that, problem statement, so to say, or the sharpness of that situation. Then the other principle, which actually comes before even framing it, what came out very strongly from Prithwijit and from Swati, was this value of observations. And I thought that was just such a beautiful idea, that even before we reach a stage, wherever we reach a stage where the learner is even ready to engage with the situation, even as facilitators, we are ready to reach that stage. There is this whole observation skill to be developed. I would take it as a skill more than anything else, because it needs that bit by bit. Just a day before yesterday, I sent my 10-year-olds who are at the real foundational on a shape hunt. And this ability to look for shapes itself needed, sharpening. So I thought this was a very important idea. So yeah, so for me, these were the few principles that emerged. Please add if I missed something.
Yeah. Anyone wants to add? I have a few things to add, but I'll just throw it open. Does anyone else want to add some things which cropped up over the...
So somebody brought out art and craft, and they do provide a lot of scope for mathematics. Any kind of art, whether it is tailoring or embroidery or crochet, with carpentry, lot of it. I mean, some people use origami very actively in terms of geometry. So any kind of craft that needs spatial understanding will cater to that.
Yeah. So as Soumya said, I think we have to keep observing and we have to keep picking up the clues. Anyone else who would like to... For me, what came out most strongly was this whole thing of not force feeding, of accepting, as Swati said, there's a mathematical need and there may be a situational need. And we don't have to force the mathematical need into the situational need, or vice versa. That we need to be accept that there are some things which are taught, which actually come from the nature of mathematics being such, having that hierarchical structure. So there are building blocks needed, and we do need to teach that, and we should not force situations into such contexts, and that word problems can help in such a situation. So what I'm getting is that more and more it's a lot about the skills that are being built up as you do such a problem or such a project. Is that right, Prithwijit? The skills which make you a mathematician, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
It's basically, yeah, I mean, uh, you observe and then you mathematize and then you do the maths. And in the process, you discover something, but a mathematician probably does more than that. I mean, mathematician creates new maths, which was not here in this article because it's pitched at school level. But professional mathematicians are after, they're after proving things which are much, much harder and which may have no connection with real life. Like, for example, I mean, those who are working to prove Riemann hypothesis, that I don't know. I mean, it may connect to many things in real life, but those who are, sort of very strongly after it may be interested in the very rich mathematical structure of the problem in the abstract sense. So they may not want to actually, devote time to the applications in real life as such. But yeah, the skills are definitely something that one should take away from this.
Yeah, yeah. And Swati, while you were talking, I was just remembering that even a simple thing like folding away clothes, as you did in your unfolding article, can actually lead to so much spatial reasoning, so much geometry in the shapes of the clothes that we fold. So yeah, we also have a comment from one of our viewers, Mr. Surya Narayan Ghanti. We have to teach concepts of a game like football. Most of the concepts can be related to volleyball, basketball, and football. Anyone wants to add to that comment?
I mean, as a country, I believe we are pretty crazy about cricket, and naturally so. We have won the World Cup twice. Okay, two generations of us relate to two different teams winning World Cup. So, and cricket has huge mathematical potential, probably much more than any other game. So, one of the dream is to, write a math book. Utilizing cricket to the fullest possible extent, as and see what happens. And I'm pretty sure football, volleyball, basketball, all of them can add various things to it as well. So in a broader sense, what we can do, there are two things. So suppose when you are trying to teach a concept, then you need to look at, okay, what are the things in the real life where this concept touches. That's one way. Another would be you pick up something like, let's say, football, and see what all math it can connect to. And both need to happen, maybe by two different groups of people, but together, I think this connection between math and real life can be enriched very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we are looking forward to that book, Swati. So, Vaidehi Madhavan, good to see you here in the audience, Vaidehi. And her comment is the abstractness of maths is itself is a beauty and skill, and one that children should acquire. Children should be trained on abstract thinking too. Um, I think we all agree with that, but any
Yeah.
suggestions on how to?
Uh, well, in school curriculum, the only topic which actually deals with abstraction is perhaps geometry. And by abstraction, if one means that, okay, it's sort of that you learn how to sort of write a mathematical statement, then you learn how to prove an assertion, or you learn how to conjecture, and then whether it's true or false. So that type of logical argument is only in geometry at school level, and definitely I think, I mean, abstract thinking should be encouraged. I mean, because that's the very essence of mathematics in the long run, and especially those, I mean, those who are working on the open problems in maths today's world. I mean, most of them. So some of them might have come up from real life, like those who are in discrete math. There are some problems which have arisen from computer science. But uh, but at the end of the day, I mean, the methods which are used to solve those problems, they have an abstract. I mean, they're quite abstract in this. I mean, it's not. I mean, you will not see them like you see something. Like there's a tree out there and you see the leaves. You won't see them like that. I mean, they come in. I mean, you think about them and then you develop. So in that sense, I mean, abstract. I mean, you cannot run away from abstract thinking when you're doing maths, because maths is more or less all about that and abstract thinking. So definitely, students should be encouraged. But mathematization is also important, because if you're trying to sort of analyze something which you're observing, see, that's why like there, when you study statistics, when you're dealing with some problems, like you want to sort of determine the average height of a population. Okay, if you can do a complete census, there's nothing like it. You just enumerate and then you have. But if you can't, if you have to use sampling, then there's a challenge. So now you see, when you come to sampling and you get some information and then you sort of you have some hypothesis, you do the testing and then you draw inference. Those things are quite abstract, because those things are purely mathematical. But the origin of the problem, the population, the people, are very real in that sense. So that's why I mean, the connection between real life and abstract thing is perhaps you see that these two things. I mean, the connection is brought out in the best way possible. I think it's in the discipline of statistics, not as much as in pure maths. But again, there are some concepts in abstract algebra, like group theory, ring theory, all those things which people study field theory. They have applications in cryptology. But maybe 100 years ago or 200 years ago, people didn't know of any use of those things. But people indulged in those activities and came up with beautiful theorems, which over the years were refined and sort of put in much more understandable form, more comprehensible form, and became a curriculum. And people studied. I mean, even if they didn't like, they had to study, and those who liked definitely sort of relished the subject. So they were all abstract, and so I mean, abstractness is definitely. I mean, it should be encouraged, and students should be sort of introduced to abstract thinking. But it is quite a challenge at school level. And except for geometry, if you look at the other topics, there's not much of abstract thinking. But
We
I
were
mean,
going back.
algebra is all about sort of playing with expressions. And then arithmetic is all about solving word problems, either profit and loss or simple interest, time and work. I mean, they're really important. I mean, at that level, they're really important. But the real abstract maths comes when one goes to, say, graduate school or maybe starts the BS programs. So then they're introduced to a different type of math, and that's completely different. I mean, that's very different from what they come across in school.
Thank you, Prithwijit. Again and again, we come back to the nature of maths. And I think that all of us would actually say, no, there is more in school math than just geometry as a vehicle for abstraction. Somya, would you like to comment on that?
So, what we have, as in I have personally found interesting, is these stories lend themselves beautifully to abstraction. We start off with whether it is stories that the children have started with, because it's a figment of their imagination, that part of it, or if it is we've taken a story and we're saying, okay, what are the different endings to a story, for example, and why is that particular ending related to the previous sentence or the previous idea or to a situation which has happened in the story. So we, more and more at Kubachi, we see that when we are using stories in a more open-ended way, stories in a more, like a collaborative process, it is lending itself very well to mathematical thinking. So, so to me, that is like a building of an abstraction process.
Great, thank you. Anybody else who wants to? So, Swati, do you want to come in with? Or shall we move on? Yeah.
The thing is, the way math is usually taught, it has a lot more things which are presented to students as very abstract things, and that doesn't help anybody, the students in particular. So yes, they need to abstract out, but they need to get their footing on something. They need to develop their intuition and, I would say, mental images before they are asked to abstract out. And once those mental images and intuitions develop, abstraction will automatically happen to a large extent. But without that, without building the foundation, if you are trying to push them out towards abstraction, I'm not sure how well that works.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that precisely for that reason, this technique which Soumya has talked about, using stories, I think that that is really a very valuable tool that that they are using. Thanks for sharing that, Soumya. We have a comment from someone from Chaitra Anil. An abstract imposes ideas in young minds to impart interest in the subject. And she says maths itself is a key. Yeah, that I think is a crucial thing, that while we have talked about the hierarchy in maths, very often maths itself is a building block for other subjects. And I think that she says going to abstract level should be implemented from basic grades levels of 3 to 4. So thank you for that comment. We are reaching the end of our time, and if there are no more comments or any words from the panelists,
Uh,
yes,
can I go? I had a thought.
yes, please.
So this, what Chetra just mentioned, no, this also just taking it forward from there, this artificial separation of disciplines is proves to be so problematic because we're just so intermeshed with each other. Even before we do language of mathematics, there's this basic language to be done. And just today we were discussing about verify some formula, and so what does this word check means. So the question that was posed was, check this. No, they're like, what's there to check? It's written, this is equal to this, what do I check? And it was just such a fair thing, no, because check as English has a particular meaning. And then so that language intermeshing with all the subjects intermeshing. And then how can we make this whole real life problem that Prithwijit, that we started off with, is actually that intermeshing, no, that of what a gulab jamun is, to how does it look, to to then framing it into a mathematical problem.
Yeah.
So I think that separation we'll have to very deliberately take out from how we teach and learn.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All right, we are at the end of our time, and I just want to thank you all so much. Prithwijit, you have really
Thank you.
added to this webinar and to At Right Angles with your articles. Thank you very much for participating. And Swati, of course, I think we just have to say, please come back very often. And I'm just so proud to see our 3 alumni and how they are using what they have studied and impacting on so many young lives. Thank you so much for joining all of us. And with that, we'll close this webinar.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.